Welcome to the Alpha Voyage Podcast. I am your host, Mr. Anthony Wren, and welcome to episode 34 of the Alpha Voyage Podcast. We got a great episode today. I am here with world-renowned voiceover actor, Mr. Roy Worley. Did I pronounce your name wrong?
Yeah, that was actually pretty good. Most people stutter on it.
Oh, no.
That was good.
I was reading it early and I was like, oh boy, I hope I don't butcher his name.
Oh man, it's hard for me to say. Listen, you did good.
Okay, I appreciate it. How you doing today?
You know what? I'm good. I'm good. Not too bad for an old man.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. That's cool. I understand from what we was talking before. You mentioned, you had 12 years of voiceover and acting experience in general. This comes my first question. Just what's it like being a voiceover artist? Like, I understand there's some challenges and some growths and everything, but how's the experience been for you so far as a voiceover artist?
Well, it's a constant parade of challenges, and I'm guessing that's like for a lot of different jobs. There's a guy out there that calls kind of coined the phrase VOpreneur. So it's a voiceover entrepreneur. And for the most part, you work alone. And so there are so many steps that have to be taken to really get yourself prepared to be able to be taken seriously as a professional. And once you do all of those things, you can start a pretty good career. For a lot of people, it's very lucrative. For a lot of us, we enjoy what we do. We pay the bills. And we are on a constant learning curve. Have to be.
Okay.
Yeah. So I could ramble on, but I think I'll just wait for your questions, so they don't just give you a lot of fluff and filler.
In all honesty, I don't mind the ramble when it comes to voiceover or acting or animation in general, since since we both got experience in those certain fields, so I don't mind the ramble because everybody has a different story when it comes to voice acting. It's just like, because when I interview other people before, it was more of like certain life experience those actors had to kind of just help them and to become the famous voiceover they are today. And it's a lot of experiences that just kind of, help them out and everything, just to make sure they kind of just branch out, to do different things. And that kind of brings to one of my questions. It was just basically, like, when it comes to voiceover acting, like, everybody has different qualities. Like, what do you think are the best qualities to have to be a voiceover artist or just an actor in general?
I would say discipline and hard work. I mean, you just can't you can't do any kind of business or job without that. And one of the biggest challenges that a lot of us who are more creative than business-like is the marketing aspect. And yet that's extremely important. People have short-term memory loss in the business, and I'm talking about clients. There was a guy that coached me early on in the business, a guy named Bill DeWeese. He's still out there. He's doing very well, very successful. Would be a great guy to interview as well. He talked about how he would give each of his clients one touch a month, usually by email. And in one particular instance, a client reached back to him, responded, and said, "Man, I was trying to think of your name the other day. Thank you for sending that email." He had forgotten his name. And that's not uncommon. So, constant marketing, not only to find new clients, but to, stay warm with existing clients, I think is the biggest challenge.
Okay, that makes sense. It's just keeping up with those certain clients, like, that has potential ongoing jobs in general, or just keeping up with them regardless of what they do?
Well, I mean, it's a good idea to reach out to all your clients on a monthly basis. And I got this morning, I did a small e-learning job It was an update to a number of slides that I had done for them about 5 or 6 years ago. And fortunately and intentionally, I've saved all my past work in files with the client's name on it. So I was able to go and to listen to how I had recorded and the style that I used. And then I was able to match that with the recordings they needed. So yeah,
Okay.
you know, you stay current with your clients, and then you try to reach out to new clients. And it's getting harder with regard to the email approach. It's not impossible.
Yeah.
A lot of clients don't like to receive emails anymore. Potential clients like video production companies, going to the pay-to-play sites many times to get their voice talent. But there's still a lot of value in direct marketing to those folks. Many times, if you give them a connection right to your website, which is very important, where your demos are, all you got to do is click and listen. Then there are still people out there that will listen to that and will want your voice or file your voice away for later. Many times, I've had people say, "Hey, I've got a job that fits your voice," and my voice is very raspy today, so I apologize for that.
No, you're fine.
But that's important to know as well, that if you're on a roster, somebody's roster, if you're in their database, then you've succeeded. You've gotten through the door.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense because I would say because like I keep up with a lot of directors daily that I've taken classes with or just to get advice from, and I've actually did some auditions because they thought of my name and everything back then. They didn't get my foot in the door just yet, but like it's
Yeah,
good
yeah.
to do these type of practices and auditions and stuff
Mhm.
like that because I consider auditions as training and everything. So
You know,
I consider
let me jump in on that one before I
yeah.
forget it.
Hmm.
But some very seasoned and successful voice talent corrected my thinking a few years back on auditioning. Auditioning is a biggest part of your work, and it's a
Hmm.
numbers game. You will audition for more jobs than you will ever get. And so you have to look at your audition as an opportunity to perform,
Hmm.
and you give it your A game, you give it your best, because if you don't, the potential client is going to hear that you didn't give it your best, and they'll just zoom right past you. And they'll know within the first 10 seconds. There's an engineer, audio engineer at one of the big studios in Chicago that years ago did one of my demos, and he was telling us in a very small group of people we had for a workshop downtown
Hmm.
that he has sat in a lot of sessions where the clients are listening to auditions that have come in, and they'll push it in the play, and they'll hear a person talk for 5 seconds or less, and boom, they're on to the next, boom, they're on to the next, boom, they're
Hmm.
on to the next. And in one case, there was a young woman who had auditioned for a client who was a well-known insurance company, and
Hmm.
they'd had the same tagline forever and the same actor forever, but they were looking for a fresh voice, possibly for radio. And
Hmm.
instead of taking stock of how they had been doing this tagline forever, she didn't give them at least one take of the tagline in the way that they were expecting. And you
Hmm.
heard the client say to his partner there, or her partner there, whoever
Hmm.
it was, that, geez, has this girl never listened to one of our commercials? And so
Hmm.
it's important, even in your auditioning, to be familiar, if you can. And usually there's something on YouTube out there, past commercials and things like that. And it's worth the effort to look them up and listen and learn. So your auditioning is just as important as the job. It may be the difference between getting the job or not.
Okay. I mean, for me, I've always considered auditioning as practice because for me, I'm always confident in auditioning regardless because I never know how it's gonna go.
Hmm.
And I'm not going to lie, it was plenty of ongoing parts for like video games and a bunch of other stuff that I could have gotten, but for me, I've, connected with a bunch of people that was also auditioning as well. And then for some reason, I just was like, okay, they are like 10 times better than me at this part. So I felt like, okay, yes, I did a good job on my thing, but I felt like this person was way better. And then so far, when I, mentioned this to myself, those actual people that knew that was better than me end up getting that part. Because I say to myself, okay, I audition for this part, like doesn't mean I'm gonna get it, but it's a good practice for it. It was only like one thing major into that, got big, like not really got big, but like I did it well as well. And it was for one of my favorite video game companies, Square Enix. It was like a mobile game called Blood Masquerade way back in 2013, 14.
Okay, all right.
And I was morally helping with, the animation perspectives and stuff like that. But I was an intern. I was still a kid back then.
All
I
right.
was 17 years old,
Yeah.
learning everything. So that was quite a good experience learning. And then it's been so long, but
Yeah.
when it came to, the director at the time, they was telling me, hey, you could use this as a learning experience and the game ended up being a success. So for me, just doing that type of thing is just enough for me. I don't mind,
Okay.
going into that branch of learning more and whichever, like I still audition here and there, but I would say it's a good learning experience in regards to practice
Oh,
for
no
me
doubt.
at least.
Yeah.
So it's just more, and that kind of just, bring up to, my next question is, so like when you practice, I've seen some people use their practices as like demos for the demo reel and stuff like that. And that kind of brings up the question is just, once somebody has a demo reel, what do you think is the best option to get that demo reel out there? Because I know sharing and all that on social medias and stuff is good, but I know there's plenty other different, what's the word I'm looking for, methods to get it out there.
Yeah, if I could back up, there's a very important step prior to having your demo made, and I'm sure you would agree with this, and that is get the best coaching you can get.
And I do agree with that.
The last time I did demos, I hired or worked with, I should say, and was privileged to have had her coach me, is Jody Gottlieb, and she's just one of the many coaches that I've sat under across the years. And now with Zoom and things like this, here I am in Chicago, she was in Los Angeles, and she prepped me really, really well. And then my current demos on my webpage, which I'll get to in just a minute, were produced by Chuck Duran. And he also coached me. And so you really need to have top drawer demos. If you don't have professionally made demos after having professional coaching, I can't overstress the professional coaching. A lot of people, like, when I was a kid, I wanted to play on a baseball team, and I played a lot of pickup games with kids in the neighborhood, left field ball, because we only had 5 guys playing and that kind of thing. And you learn to catch, you learn to hit just out there with your friends, and you think, okay, I can do this. I got this. And you go out for a team, and then you realize there's a lot you don't know. It's the same with any job, I would imagine, and the same in voiceover. But to answer your question, it's a very good question. I think that your website is crucial. Your website is not only a platform where you can display your demos, and anymore people are doing video demos, and I have those as well on my website. But you really need to do some serious branding, and there again, you need some professional help with that. And so one of the coaches for audiobooks, and I've done a number of audiobooks, over 260 now.
Wow.
And a lot of those were children's books for a particular company out on the West Coast to help kids learn to read. It was kind of fascinating. But many of them lately have been nonfiction books and Christian-oriented books. I have a master's of divinity degree because I've been in ministry for decades, and I was able to take on some challenging things that had German and Greek and Hebrew and Latin and stuff in it, and it was tough for me as well. But my coach, Sean Pratt, he taught me how to narrate nonfiction. And you're even acting when you're narrating on nonfiction. Your role is the actor, and you need to be engaging. I think I sidetracked myself on where I was going to go with this, but he got, you know, oh, I know what it was. One of the things he wanted us to do in the lessons, one homework assignment was choose 3 descriptors for yourself as a audiobook narrator or as a voice actor. So I went to Facebook in my personal page and I said, a lot of you have heard my work. What 3 words do you think describes my voice? And from that, I got the 3 words that you can see on my website. And from that, the young lady that developed my website created visuals that, rich, distinctive, and memorable are the 3 words. And then my tagline is like your favorite cup of coffee. And so she created a cup of coffee with foam on the top and a microphone in it. And, that was a very subtle, but, tip of the hat to, this guy's a voice actor. So your website, I think, is very important. You can put a bio up there, which helps people to get to know you. Photograph to show that you're really human and not AI. And a lot of different things. That said, when I get a new demo, I will put a post up on LinkedIn. I will put a post on the other social media. And many of my friends will share that link. And so, that gets the word out there.
Okay. And I literally just followed you on LinkedIn like an hour ago.
Great, man. I appreciate that. Yeah.
No problem. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense to have a website just to kind of like branch out there and just show your stuff, even though people have a lot of different plausible options they can do as well. But for me, it's like the website is normally
that's your billboard. That's your home base.
Mm-hmm.
And all the social media should be used to direct people back to your website so that they can get to know you and hear your demos or see your video demos.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because I do agree with that, because like I do the same thing with regarding this and my podcast and everything, because I started this like back in 2021, and like my first season is on Instagram, so I was trying to branch out and do something different and everything. So I got different voice actors with different video game stuff like that.
Good.
The main thing for this whole thing is just to like interest people into interviewing voice actors on their careers and everything, and hopefully it influences other people that's going for the same career goals as you do the same thing. So I thought that was a pretty nice notion to do, because when it came to voice acting, people was like always asking, and the main thing I always say is, one, the main thing you gotta do, because I always tell people, no matter what you do, don't be overconfidently cocky when you audition.
Sure.
And the reason why I say that is because when you audition, you want to take pride in having, I guess you could say, having fun, because like I take this very professional, but I'll say like have fun just doing it, because and when it comes to voice acting, you're not going to be number one in everything. I know that for sure. So,
but you know what? Here's a couple of things, if you don't mind.
I don't mind.
From an old dog. The thing, I agree with the premise that we should enjoy what we do. Here are the things that will help me as a voice actor, and I think anybody else, to enjoy it, because it will help me to nail the audition many times and get a job. First of all, coaching is so important. Somebody to teach you how to interpret copy, whether it's a piece of commercial copy, whether it is radio or television copy, whether it is an audiobook, and if it's an audiobook, is it nonfiction or fiction? Is it religious? Is it fantasy? And all these things have different nuances, right? And so you find your niche, whatever that is in voiceover, and you become the best you can be with your God-given tool, your voice and your mind,
Mm-hmm.
and let those work together with your creativity. And when you're prepared, you will enjoy it. There'll be down
Exactly.
days. There'll be down days. There's a young woman out there who's an audiobook narrator and an author, and she was saying the other day in a Facebook post how for the
Mm-hmm.
first time in many years she had a week without any audiobook narration work. That
Mm-hmm.
happens to all of us. There will be
Mm-hmm.
those downtimes, but when we're prepared, the sharpest axe cuts the trees easiest. It's a joy to cut wood with a sharp axe. So when we prepare ourselves, we become that sharp axe and we enjoy what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because I've always tell people, continue to enjoy, what you're doing and everything. And then
Yeah.
sometimes when voice actors or, actually got ongoing roles and stuff like that, I always tell people, for some reason, like I know not everything is going, not every, let's say, for example, directors and all that, not all of them are going to be, you know, comfortable with improvising, but I always thought improvising helped me out when it came to.
I hear that. Yeah, I hear that from a lot of people who have studied improv.
Yeah, because I've always thought improvising always helped me out because when it came to other stuff that I did, I was like, okay, this line, when I practiced, I was like, okay, this line is good, but let me see if I can up the ante on it just a bit. Because like you don't want to improvise a lot based on, let's say, what the director or the author wants and everything. But I always tell people, if you're gonna improvise, like practice improvising first, and then if you want to include that with your audition, see if they're comfortable with it first before just put that in your actual audition. Everything like, all right, that kind of brings me to my other question. Have you ever improvised during a recording session you did before, or are you comfortable with improvising during recording sessions?
Well, let's say, let me speak to the audition improvisation.
Mm-hmm.
Couple of very, very experienced coaches told me when you're doing an audition, you should do no more than 2 takes unless they
Mm-hmm.
specifically say 1 take only, and you
Mm-hmm.
must honor that.
Mm-hmm.
Honor what they are asking for, and so your
Mm-hmm.
first take, give them what they want. In the second take, give them your improv. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I don't advise changing the copy, but if by improv you mean just being a little playful or real serious or something that's
Mm-hmm.
departure, it makes sense for the copy, but seems like a little bit of a departure from the specs they give you in the audition. But always give
Mm-hmm.
them what they ask for first, and then give them the improv. But
Yeah.
as far as in a recording session, I whether it's in a live session downtown Chicago or whether it is a live directed session here in my booth, which is just to my
Mm-hmm.
left, and with Source Connect, anymore you can. I've had clients in Germany, clients in London, all over the United States, call in to give. I think one was from Finland years ago,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they give you direction, and so you're just literally waiting for them to tell you what they want.
Mm-hmm.
I had one recently where a young woman was the client, and she was coming in from Scotland on the Source Connection,
Mm-hmm.
and she had a piece of copy. And when I'm doing a live session, many times the client will not have experience, and they'll say, "Okay, I'm not familiar. What do we do?" And I said, "Well, listen, why don't we do this if it seems good to you?" And always say that. Always, defer to them. Be courteous. Why don't I just read the first paragraph or the first, 2 graphs, and that'll help me because I've got an idea in my mind of tone and pace, and then you tell me whether it matches that or not. And many times they'll say, "Oh yeah, that was a nice read, but on this one sentence here, here's how I had it in my mind." Now that's golden. You got to listen to that. And I said, well, why don't you read it like you were thinking you want it to sound, and then I'll do my best to emulate that. And she did, and we were able to copy it. So there wasn't really any improvisation in that directed session. But I
Mm-hmm.
would say in if you have an idea and they seem to be open to the ideas, remember, you're being directed, you're not directing them.
Mm-hmm.
And so if the client and the engineer are on that session and they're talking back and forth, I keep my mouth shut.
Mm-hmm.
I'm there to be the voice, not the director. And one of the fastest ways to lose a client is to start telling them what they ought to do. I referred
Mm-hmm.
somebody one time, and that spoke a different language, and I didn't really know the person. I just knew that they had done a lot of work, and this client was looking for somebody. And I said, well, I don't know them, but here's this person. And the client got back to me after they had hired the voice talent and said, by the way, you really don't want to recommend that person ever again, because they took over the session, were very rude, were telling us that we were wrong in the copy and the way we wrote out the language that person spoke and everything. And I was really embarrassed and chagrined. And that was a lesson in, don't just recommend somebody because they seem to be famous. Make sure you
Mm-hmm.
actually know them and have worked with them. But as far as the improv, if it's a directed session, they'll tell you what they want. If you have an idea, you can say, I have an idea. I wonder if I could try it and see what you think. But you want to make sure you've got a good relationship, and maybe just only do that once. And,
Mm-hmm.
remember, we're there to satisfy them,
Mm-hmm.
not to show off other things that we can do. They heard us in an audition, and they hired us for what they heard in the audition. They're
Mm-hmm.
not hiring us for improv necessarily. Now,
Yeah.
I could be totally wrong on that because I'm not an improv guy. I could probably benefit from it, but this is just my experience.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense because the reason I mentioned sort of improv and everything is
Uh-huh.
because I usually just improv either way before
Hmm.
and after the audition, like never during the audition at all because I've I've been, blessed to see, group, auditions and stuff like
Yeah,
that
yeah.
on Zoom and everything. And, and I've surprisingly, heard people like I remember I was a part of this one group audition and everything. And everybody that was there besides me was saying, hey, I should recommend this. Except for me, I was like, well, I'm just here to deal with the,
Yeah, yeah.
the client wants and everything. If she wants to hear what I improv and everything, then I can send her what I practiced before and I can send her what I practiced afterwards. Cause like that's what I mentioned. And the embarrassing part about that part is like I didn't know that she listened to me say that. So she sent me an email saying, hey, do you mind if I listen to what you improv before and after the session? And I messaged, I was like, no disrespect to you and everything, what you written is perfectly. Because like what I did was I just, you know, I used the same line, but I just, just different the way I said it.
But
Because
see
like
that,
is
that yeah, as long as you're not changing the copy, and
yeah,
from what I understand, you're into animation, so
yeah.
I know nothing about that and that kind of acting. I did do some voiceover for animation series called Kids Corner. It was a Christian broadcast on radio.
Mm-hmm.
And the company, I mean, a ministry out of Canada would come down to the Chicago area and use a former TV station, and we would all gather. It was the greatest fun I've ever had. Where all the actors would gather around, and you could see each other, and we're all sitting on a stool at different mics, and we've got the copy in front of us. And of course, the guys directing were in the sound room,
Mm-hmm.
and there's just nothing like the energy and the synergy that you feel, and I'm sure you have numerous times
Yes.
when you're there together and you're feeding off of each other's energy and the lines and the way lines are said and stuff. And then
Mm-hmm.
so and of course there would be multiple takes when the director would say, hey, you kind of got out of character there, read that again and blah blah blah. But that was so much fun. And it's been a while since I've done that. I'd love to do that again.
It's been 5 years since I've done something like that with a group.
Okay.
But it is a fun experience. But, it's kind of embarrassing for me because I know the director won, but I just feel like if I say something wrong, just be like, yeah, this is not the possible thing to do. So it's kind of a good learning
Listen,
experience and everything.
tact is your friend. Here's the thing. The person that wrote the copy for the commercial, the person that wrote the script for the animation, they are creative people by nature, correct?
Hmm.
And we creatives, when we create something, it's almost like we've given birth to a baby, right? Don't come in and tell me my baby's got a booger in his nose, Don't try to change my baby. It's my baby.
Oh
So you got to be
man,
tactful, right?
yeah, that you got to be tactical for that because it kind of brought me up to another situation. Not really a situation, but it was more of like I didn't expect to be um performing multiple roles and like it was a practice session, but we were still
All right.
recording for
All right.
practice. So I was like, oh shoot, okay. So the author, she wanted people just to practice, three
Yeah.
different roles. The
Yeah.
like the hero role, the anti-hero role, and the serial killer role, because like
Oh,
it was a type of
yeah.
crime thing or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
So I was saying to myself, I was like, okay, why not have a film I nailed the serial killer role and everything?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
ended up, and when we did the practice, I was like, okay, I see what I did better. I see what I did better, and I see what the mistakes I did in. And the author, she was more impressed the way I did the serial killer role. And as I was talking to her, I was telling her, you have to have a really complex mindset to understand that type of notion. Because I believe when you playing a character or just in general, you got to have a complex mindset of what you not really what you think, but of what the author. No, I guess you can say what you think, but what the author wants. I mean, like,
Yeah.
okay, this is my
Yeah.
take on it. It may not be right, but
Yeah.
it wouldn't hurt trying.
But you know what?
So
It's, I'm sorry to interrupt. It's kind of
no,
like
you're fine.
one of the things, and I was very grateful for this instruction from Sean
Mm-hmm.
Pratt. When you are an audiobook narrator,
Mm-hmm.
play all the characters.
Yeah.
If it's fiction, there are multiple characters.
Mm-hmm.
And so I saw a video one time, well-known narrator Scott Brick talks about how to do, if you're a man, to do a female voice. He goes
Mm-hmm.
deeper. He doesn't try to go higher. He goes deeper. And it works. Listen to some of his audiobooks sometimes. But when you're producing as the narrator, the audio version of the book, you are the director and you have to direct yourself and you have to make choices, acting choices. So
Mm-hmm.
what I learned the hard way is that you have to make that clear to the author up front or to the
Mm-hmm.
rights holder. I'm
Mm-hmm.
making these choices. If it's a bigger platform, like I did a book for HarperCollins, and I've done books from Macmillan and things like that. And those folks, they just turn you loose. But I've worked with 3 individual authors so far who found me on LinkedIn and through word of mouth and so on. And I tell them up front, I'm going to make the acting choices. Now I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
standard practices. I will send a 15-minute sample. Why don't you send me some dialogue from your book that you'd like to hear, my character work and stuff? And I'm going to set the tone and I'm going to set those character voices, and they're in concrete if you approve them. Because
Mm-hmm.
while we can change them after the book is finished, it will cost you money to do that. And so,
Makes sense.
the hard lesson I learned, there's a guy locally that was a writer. He's in a writer's club, and I met him at a what do you call it, a networking group in the Chicago area. And he said, he's a public speaker, but he also writes. And he says, listen, I wrote a 14-minute long short story for the Halloween season, and it's set in the Western, in the West. It's got a sheriff and stuff. And because I'm from the South originally, I pull
Mm-hmm.
that cowboy out of the hat just any time, man. He's right there always with me, So I can do Westerns. And I invited him to come to the studio to direct me. Biggest mistake I've ever
Oh
made.
wow.
he had no experience in directing. He had what he thought he wanted in his head to be read. And frankly, I thought it took something away from the drama. Now, he seemed to be pleased with the finished product and he paid me, but it really ate up my time, ate it up, and the product that came from it was not what I thought what it could have been.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, that
there's that. I'm just saying there's that, you're talking about the people, the improv, and if you got a regular client, you can build a relationship and earn the right to be heard, not only just from the length of your relationship, but from the quality of your work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Has there ever been a time where you had to, let's say, practice multiple roles in a session before?
In a session, no.
Okay.
Usually I'm cast for a specific sound in a commercial, or a tone. I've done a lot of work for local tire stores. When I say local, I mean localized in their
Yeah, in
vineyard.
the area, the neighborhood. Yeah.
Well, in their own neighborhoods, it's across the country. And I've narrated multiple Wild West books, and I enjoy that. It's that is like slipping on your favorite pair of boots or slippers and just get into character and have fun with it. Those are really enjoyable for me.
Yeah. Yeah. As a big fan of Wild Westerns myself, that's pretty good to hear. Even though I'm more of the investigative type of stories. And
I would love to narrate one of those. Now, my comfort zone for adult language is very narrow, so
yeah,
I don't get a lot of those kinds of books. It's not
yeah,
me judging anybody; it's just me being true to myself.
yeah.
But I would love to do that. And if there are any Christian authors out there that are looking for a different voice for clean readings, for a Christian romance, or whatever, this is a shameless self promotion here.
Hey, folks, just watching this episode, you heard it here first.
Yeah.
But but yeah, that makes sense though, and there's nothing wrong with branching like from like different subjects, genres, and everything. And because I was talking to somebody else that I knew, that's in voice over, because I think because she works for an anime studio, the Crunchyroll and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always, she will always ask me, when performing, do you prefer to have others in the recording studio with you, or you rather work alone? In my honest opinion, for me, I would more likely prefer to work alone, but I don't mind working with other people just to learn from them. What about you?
In audiobooks, particularly fiction,
Mm-hmm.
I read the book. I proof the book to make sure I am pronouncing names and place names correctly and things like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
And also to get an idea of the character. There are some characters. I did a series called the Bud Shumway series. They were set in modern times, but out west. And the author, Chinley Miller, was great. This Bud Shumway was a small town sheriff who preferred growing watermelons in Colorado than than actually doing sheriffing work. But he ended up having to solve these mysteries.
Mm-hmm.
And when the first one I read, I got an idea for him, and then he had a sidekick deputy that was kind of a goof, and I had a voice in mind for him. And then his wife was kind of a take charge kind of woman. She was an entrepreneur, had owned a bowling alley restaurant in this small town, and did a bunch of other things in the town. And so I had a character voice and attitude, and in mind. And those came to fruition and actually developed through the 6 or 7 books that I narrated for her.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that was like getting lost in the zone. So
Yeah.
being by myself, I never thought about it until you just asked the question, but I think being by myself was a big plus.
Yeah.
Now you get guys, I'd love to pick Scott Brick's mind and Johnny Heller and those guys, that they're so big and in demand that they actually have their own engineer maybe a
Wow.
director. I don't know. I'd like to find out. But to answer your question, I like being by myself. Now, if I'm doing a commercial or if I'm doing a corporate demo that's internal or something like that, a live session, I prefer it to be a directed session because that really helps me to get into the mind of the client, and they can tell me, here's what I'm looking for in this line, or with
Hmm.
emphasis on this word. And that happened last week in a directed session. And we were done, and no pickups later. It was all good and copacetic. We
Okay.
were happy.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because for me, like I said before, I don't mind learning for other people and everything, but it's just like for me by myself, it's just, when I'm in the zone and everything, and they can help me, learn and bring that type of notion on the certain characters and stuff that I'm working on because I was talking to somebody the other day about that because every voiceover artist, voice actor, and everybody they got that that role that gives you like the most professional satisfaction. Be like, yes, I did this, and I know I did a damn good job at it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So like even though the main one for me was the thing I was discussing, but
Yeah.
but it just felt like okay, like I said before, I did that. It's like I feel like I don't need to do anything else because like it's a big company. But what roles? Because since you say you voiced a lot of audiobooks and everything too, like what I wouldn't say because I know it's probably a bunch of roles that gave you professional, satisfaction that work with you is probably but like what was the three? I would say top three that you really enjoyed working as that give you that professional satisfaction.
In audiobooks, I did a series for a writer named Scott Harris, who
Hmm.
he knocks out these 3-hour great westerns in a weekend. And he did this series called Kaz Vigilante Hunter, and then with
Oh,
separate titles. And if you
okay.
look that up on audible.com, you can hear those six. And so I enjoyed playing the role of Kaz, but I
Hmm.
also I love doing bad guys. My mind goes back to the stereotypical characters of some weaselly bad guys. The little guy that wants to be big dog, and he's got the big oaf who's an idiot that he's bossing around and stuff. And he's like, "What did I tell you? You need to put that gun down, or I'm gonna shoot you in the head." Stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
I love doing those. But Kaz, he was a cool character, man. He just nothing flustered him. He just, he was his own person. Always got the bad guy. Then I had a lot of fun. I got booked for a internet commercial for Cheez-Its,
Hmm.
and did that one, and it was Cheez-Its Duos, and that may still be out. It's probably on the internet somewhere.
All right.
That was a lot of fun, and it was such a fun thing for me because I went into the studio downtown Chicago,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
the producer who had booked me was working with the ad agency. These young people, young adults who would come in, a couple of guys, a couple of gals, and they'd come in, and she was working with them. And so I go into the booth, and I've got my cans on, and I'm listening, and they say, "Okay, why don't you just give this a read one time through, and then we'll discuss which direction we want to go after that."
Hmm.
And this has only happened twice in my life. And so I read it, and I could not see through the glass. I could not see the client sitting at the desk outside. I could only see the back of the engineer as he was looking at the video, because they were putting it to video. And I couldn't hear anything. And I'm talking,
Hmm.
2-3 minutes went by, which is unusual. And finally the young man, clicked the talkback button, Mike, and he said, well, and I thought, man, they're going to fire me right now because of his hesitation. But what he said was, we couldn't really find anything wrong with that, but why don't you give us some more options just to make use of our time here? And it was a lot of fun. That made it fun and very satisfying, but that's extremely rare that happens. In contrast to that, I was in the same studio for another job, and it was a well-known sandwich shop in Boston. And I think I counted, we did almost 80 takes on this one.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, everybody wanted to have their input. There were like 3 different people on the other end. They were not in studio. They were in Boston, and we were doing it by, remote. And it seemed like every producer and everybody in that client base wanted to have, well, let's hear it this way. Let's hear it that way. And so the engineer that was running, the rig in the studio that I was in afterwards, he was kind of irritated. He said, "Man, they made you do that more than you needed to." I said, "Dude, that's what they paid me for. They wanted 100 takes. I would have given them 100 takes." So, you got to remember, we're here to serve. We serve the client, and we get to have fun doing
it. 80 takes. I know that had to go on for
No,
hours.
it was a couple hours, and man, my throat was shot. It was a radio ad, and radio ads typically are higher energy. And come on down and get a sandwich at the sandwich shop. Come on, everybody likes this sandwich. Come on in and get a dozen, kind of stuff. And it's all amped up and that kind of thing. So, but it's part of the work.
Yeah. I mean, I think the most takes I ever did in the session was, 76. Because like the thing about that one was, it was 15 different directors for that one thing, and I said to myself, I was like, okay, I'm not complaining. So when that whole thing was going on, I'm just like, okay, so I'm hearing this person, what they want, I'm hearing that person, I'm saying what they're saying, and I was just like, I'm looking at time. I didn't realize that 7 hours went past.
Oh no!
As I'm paying attention.
See, that's why the animation voice actors went on strike a few years ago to get better working hours, because a lot of times you guys in a video game are actually shouting.
Yeah.
In a battle scene or something, so.
The crazy thing, I wasn't complaining because if I remember correctly, because they mentioned, because the director that I knew personally, she mentioned to me, if it's a long session, we will pay you, double that for that session. So I wasn't complaining.
Awesome.
So
yeah,
I was like, okay. And the funny thing, before I got home, before that whole thing started, I literally stocked up on food and everything. So I was like, oh man, we're gonna be here for a minute. As soon as I was done, I literally fell asleep in my freaking bed. I was so exhausted.
Yeah, you know what? And that's important. A lot of people don't realize that voice acting it takes a lot of energy if you're doing it, because there's not just the physicality of it, there's emotion involved, right? And that's draining. When I do audiobooks, I take breaks every 30 minutes for about 5 or 10 minutes, get up, walk around, think through what's coming up. Unless the chapters are short. Sometimes, in a book, I've seen chapters last only about 10 minutes, but there's like 50 or 60 of them. But even in nonfiction, I did one for an author named Peter Zion, who's a bit of a controversial guy. He's a socioeconomic, geopolitical guy. And he's does a lot of research, and some of his conclusions, don't match with other people's conclusions, which is the way the world is.
Yeah.
And I went on YouTube to find him, to see if I could see him. And I did. I found him lecturing in front of, a large audience. And this guy, man, he was fire. He was just blowing it out there, and because he was passionate about what he was teaching. And I tried to incorporate that into the book, and the book was called Disunited Nations. And but it was acting, because that's not me. I was trying to I wasn't trying to be him or impersonate him, but to put a little bit of his energy and engagement into the acting. And he was the inspiration, because after all, he was the author.
Okay.
But it does tire you out.
Oh man, I will not be going to tell you how much coffee I wasted just off of one session alone. It's just,
Well,
at first,
I've started drinking mushroom coffee just to see if it does give you more energy without the caffeine. And because the older I get, the less friendly the caffeine is to me. So, well, what other questions can I answer for you?
it's like just three more, and that's
Yeah.
pretty much it.
All right.
But when it comes to, just voice acting, I should try the mushroom coffee now. You thought said that. But
Yeah.
but when it comes to, being a voice actor, like, what do you think yourself? Obviously everybody has different opinions, but like, what do you think is like the most important skill to have as a voice actor?
For the voice acting part, it is, I would say, the desire to continue learning and to continue sharpening that axe that we talked about earlier,
Mm-hmm.
to not get satisfied or to get cocky and think, oh, I've got a little bit of success under my belt. If we stay still, we don't really stay still. We're going backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say, as far as, skill is learning new ways to attack copy and to interpret copy. And you can learn that by a multitude of teachers. I've had a number, probably half a dozen different coaches, and I've learned something from every one of them, every single one of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, in terms of skill, it's probably learning how to interpret copy, because all
Mm-hmm.
copy is not the same.
Yeah.
And then to be able to bring those acting skills that hopefully you're learning to bear, with in terms of the right emotion. Yeah, I would say that.
Okay. And okay, that makes a lot of sense. Um, and when it comes to just voice acting, it's always the main criteria that people should handle, but not a lot's going to handle is constructive criticism.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
how do how do you handle receiving feedback personally? But what advice would you give to somebody that, you know, just to handle feedback in general? Because constructive criticism is one of the main things that, in my opinion, people can't handle. I mean,
Yeah.
I got used to it the first time after the third session. Be like, okay, they're trying to give me this advice so I can better my, my criteria, my craft. But like, what do you think personally? How it is the better to handle receiving feedback or direction from producers or directors during, let's say, recording sessions or emails or just in general?
Well, like in a recording session, like a directed session or something like that, you
Mm-hmm.
need to understand that you're working for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
You're there to give them, to the best of your ability, what they want.
Mm-hmm.
You may go through a very grueling session and come away thinking, I don't want to ever work for that person again. And there may be,
Mm-hmm.
I've actually, come up with one or two across the years, people that I just won't work with again because I found them to be unreasonable. But
Mm-hmm.
when you are a voice actor, you must develop a thick skin.
Mm-hmm.
You need to
Yeah.
understand that there is no one size fits all voice, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to understand that you have your niche or niches, and what is your money voice, and what do you book most of. And most of the voiceover work is non-broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
I did a boatload of work last year in telephony. Thank you for calling the hospital. Please listen
Mm-hmm.
as our menu has changed. Now, as a voice actor, that's my favorite line. Our menu has changed is money for me, because they're going to call me to re-record that, right? So, all kidding aside, you develop a thick skin, but when you're going to find that there are some coaches out there, and before you sign up and pay your hard-earned money to go with a coach, you're going to want to do your research on them, find out, are they legit? Or are they people that tried to make it in voice acting and couldn't do it? So now they're taking your money, and they're kind of scam artists. Get in some discussion groups on Facebook for new, if you're getting in it too new,
Mm-hmm.
voice acting. If you're new, don't try to join the pro full-time working voice actor groups, because you're going to ask questions that have been answered 4,000 times, and the professional voice actors are at a different level, and we're going to ask questions about tech or about this or that comes from experience. We already know the other stuff, the other basic stuff. But get involved in those groups. They will help you tremendously. Then once you choose, if you're a thick-skinned individual, there's certain coaches out there I could recommend to you that will just scorch your hide in a session. I mean, they'll take you to hell and back.
I read it.
You'll learn from them. But then, if you want somebody else that's a little more gentle, if you're just starting out, I can recommend a certain coach. If you want somebody that's in between, but like my coach Jody Gottlieb, I can't say enough good about her. She will only take people that she thinks are ready for what she has to offer. She's not going to take beginners. And she is a producer. She's been in the business for a long time, and she's not mean, but she's not Aunt B on Mayberry either. She's a skilled professional, and she will stop you in the middle of a read and say, "Okay, stop. You got an announcement. Start over. Just talk." And you got to go in there and say, "Okay, she is my teacher. I'm not going to be offended by anything that she says." And or he says if it's somebody else. Tom Pinto is a great one. He was a coach for me for narration and promo and things like that. And he's a really lively Italian guy, man. And you'll be reading and he'll stop you in his own way. But he and I are about the same age, so I'm not offended at all. And I thought, man, this guy, he's been doing this. He's been doing this for decades. He knows everything. Just learn from him. If you've got a thin skin and you're going to get known in the industry as a whiner, don't be a whiner. Be a pro.
Yeah.
Suck it up, buttercup. And if you need to cry, wait till you get out of the session. I mean, that's a little harsh, but
you gotta handle it one. Yeah, you gotta handle it one way or another. I mean, back then, even before I started doing what I'm doing, I had a very thin skin, and then one thing happened one day. I was like, you know what? I don't care. It's not like I care what people think, but I don't care what people think. So I just like, okay, because like when I first, got into like my little audition, I was like, okay. The first thing I thought was like, okay, I know I'm going to expect somebody to be like, okay, that's not going to be right. You need to do this better and that better. Just hand that with a grain of salt and call it a day. And then every time when I forgot her name, but excuse me, every time when she mentioned, stuff that I need to work on to me and stuff like that, I would always write it down and everything. I was like, okay, that makes sense and everything. And then she sent me about like 6 months later, she was like, I noticed you didn't make a big deal about what I was saying to you. Is this something you need to tell me? I was like, no. I was like, nope, we're good.
There are coaches and there are coaches, and I'm telling you, man, I have learned from every coach that I've had. Another thing you want to do is watch Chuck Duran's and Stacy Aswad, his girlfriend, do their video podcast. They have all the famous people on there. And you'll learn from other, the very successful voice talent just by listening to their interviews.
That makes sense, because I've always said it's always good to learn from any and everybody, because everybody can give you the best, advice. Some can give you the worst, some can give you in between. So it's always good learning advice for everybody. And then that kind of just brings, to the last question, because like somebody asked me about this, and people was like, how do you handle, tight deadlines and high pressure situations? And the recording studios, the high pressure situations I've really never dealt with that as much or never noticed to deal with that.
Yeah.
It just happens, and then okay, we're back to where we at. But the tight deadlines, I just be like, I just told them, okay, um, like I always say, like you like in the back, you like think in the back of your mind that you know you got a deadline, but in the front of your mind, think that okay, it's not a deadline, but let me get this done as quick as possible
Hmm.
to you know to make sure things get to, let's say, direct and applicable manner, because it's been a lot where I deal with very tight deadlines and stuff like that, and director may want to change the deadline to earlier. Never, I understand now, but back then I never understood it. But
Sure.
I was just like, okay, let me just take care of this right now as soon as possible, and then send them what I got and just call it a day. Like that's how I handle. Like, how would you handle like tight deadlines?
Well, there's most people. The biggest complaint that I've heard through the grapevine about voice talent
Mm-hmm.
is not
Mm-hmm.
delivering on time, and that's not
Mm-hmm.
even with tight deadlines.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because I've been doing this long enough, I can take a look at let's say, an e-learning project, and which I did one this morning. It was, like I said, it was pickups for some updated slides, and it was like 6 slides. That's it. And I knew from past experience I could knock that out in about 30 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
more or less. When they talked to me, when the producer contacted me by email, she said, we would like to have a 24 to 48 hour turnaround.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can squeeze 30 minutes into a schedule so that
Mm-hmm.
so I can accommodate this client, because I want them to write back. Like, my biggest client is a telephony client. It's a chain of hospitals and clinics in Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
When they send me something, I know I can do that in about 15 minutes time. And I usually will tell them, I can have this done for you in 24 hours. And then usually I'll get it done the same day.
Mm-hmm.
So this week, one of those contacts, I have about a half a dozen contacts, texts there, and that say, okay, this particular clinic needs this auto attendant recorded. And most of the time they say, as always, we appreciate your fast turnaround. That's important. It's very important. It's not just the quality of the work that you do, but your fast turnaround. And
Yeah.
that goes a long way. But as far as deadlines and things like that, the more you work, the more you get a feel for how long it takes you to do something. And if someone says, I need this done, by Friday, and it's Monday, you can say, great. And if they say, well, is there any way you can squeeze this in the next 48 hours? So take a look at it. You may need to stay up late at night. Now, for me, I'm an early bird. I get up at 3:30 every morning. It's not because I have
Mm-hmm.
to. I've always been like that. And so
Mm-hmm.
many times I will knock out something, which is great for my clients in Europe, because most of them are 7 or 8 hours ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can knock that out and send it over to them, and they get it before end of day, their work day.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as tight deadlines go, the more efficient you become in your work process, the deadlines don't bother you as much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, because that's exactly what I was thinking. It's it's just, even though sometimes I audition a lot left and right, sometimes I don't, but I
Mm.
still know that okay, I got this deadline. Let me not to try not to think about it, because
Yeah.
okay, if I see a deadline, I'll be like, oh crap, I won't be able to get this done on time. But for some reason, I never had that type of problem with deadlines in general, because
Now, I have to admit that deadlines don't bother me as much, maybe, as other people, because I'm full time. This is all I do. And if a person has a day job and they're working on getting into voiceover, and they're working
hmm
after hours, and they have a deadline, yeah, I can see where that would be more stressful. And if you have a family with little kids and dogs and chickens running around, and more people are getting chickens these days, to keep in their backyard, then you have those challenges. And so, yeah, I can see where someone might be a little stressed out.
Yeah.
They got to wait till the kids get in the bed and their spouse gets in their bed, and now they can go into the closet that they cleaned out and made their recording booth, to be able to record in silence, and pray that nobody turns on a leaf thrower at 10 o'clock at night, a leaf blower at 10 o'clock at night outside your house.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, that I completely agree with that. But that pretty much that's pretty much it for my all 21 questions I asked you.
All right,
So
my friend. Thank you so much. It's great to see you. And if I can help you in any way, let me know.
hey, I greatly appreciate it. It's just great, finally talking with you and everything and getting to learn your career and everything and just, just having all our good conversation with you in general because, there's nothing wrong with talking, getting advice from almost everybody. So it's great, learning and getting advice from you and just, you know, just talk to you in general though. So that is pretty
Well,
good
thank
experience.
you. It's been a privilege, man. I appreciate it. It's always great to see young men like you, hustling and getting out there and getting the job done.
Much appreciated. And thank you to everybody that check out this episode 34 of the podcast, which will be uploaded later on. And thank you for Mr. Roy Worley for coming on here with me today. And everybody, I hope you have a nice day. End the recording.